Okay, Mom, this is for you. I'm going to make this video to show you how to make bread, and I'm going to talk through the weight and the cupped measurements for you if you wanted to change to weight. So here's my starter. I fed my starter at noon today and it doubled in size. This is how it looks, really bubbly, and it has a dome on the top, but it's hard to tell at this angle, so it's ready to use. The weight measurement that I use for one loaf is 150 grams. For one loaf, you need half a cup of starter. So I'm going to go ahead and put my 150 grams in, or my half cup of starter. For the water, you need a cup and a half of water, or in weights, 350 grams. And whisk it up until it's milky and frothy on top. Now that I have this, it's time for the flour. You're going to need 3 cups of flour. I'm making 2 loaves at a time in this, so that's why it looks like a ton. Now I'm going to take my whisk and I'm going to start to incorporate. At this time, you would add, and I'm going to start to incorporate. At this time, you would add 1 teaspoon of salt. Go ahead and add that now. I add that at the hour mark. So now all I'm doing is making sure everything gets nice and incorporated. It's very dry. Basically, you just don't want any dry spots to show. I will work this the best I can, and if I need to add a splash of water to help, I will. At this time, I'm going to add just 1/8 of a cup of water. Basically just like a tablespoon or so to help get this moving a little better. I shouldn't see any dry flour bits, but this should not resemble a firm ball at this time. I'm going to let it sit with its cover on for 1 hour. And at the hour, I will come back and I will show you stretching and folding. I will add the salt and I'll show you how to do that too. All right, it has been 1 hour since we first originally mixed our dough. It's looking very shaggy, very wet. That's okay. So what we're gonna do, I have it on the scale. If you're not weighing, you're going to do 10 grams per loaf, or 1 teaspoon of salt per loaf. Now I like to take a little bit of my boiled water, just a little, and I wet the top. It helps dissolve our salt. Now we're going to kind of circle the edge of my bowl, pick up the dough, and just pass it to the other side. I turn my bowl a 1/4 turn. We're going to pick up the dough and just push it or flop it over to the other side. Another 1/4 turn, up and over, and another 1/4 turn, up and over. I do this basically until the dough gets kind of hard to pick up. See how it's not nearly coming up as high as it was on the first 4. That is okay. This is how we develop gluten in the bread, and how we add some tension and buoyancy so that we get some nice height when we bake our bread. Okay, so now that our dough looks a lot smoother, it looks like it has, it's going to resemble a little bit of a dough ball here, and that's what we want. Every time we do what are called stretch and folds in this instance, we add more tension to our bread, which helps smooth it out, take a lot of that texture from the flour away. So I'm going to go ahead and seal these 2 up, set them aside, and in another 30 minutes we're going to come back and do stretch and folds again. So I will come back and show you what the bread is looking like and show you that process again. It's been 30 minutes. So the dough's looking like there's some bubbles on the top. That's okay, normal, it's looking smooth. just around the bowl, stretch the dough, and fold it over. 4 turns, 4 times around the bowl. That's all you do this time. It's starting getting definitely more tense. You can tell it's growing in size. It's getting less sticky. So that's what you want it to look like. That's the second stretch. First one was adding our salt. Second one is just the stretch on its own. I will leave that for another 30 minutes, and at 9:40 we'll come back and we'll do some coil folds on this, and then again at 10:20, and then we'll be done and we'll put it in the fridge overnight. It's been another 30 minutes, more bubbles on the bread. Go ahead and stretch this around the bowl once, twice, 3, 4 times, and then I'm going to do some I can't remember what those are called, but just kind of tuck the ends under type clasp folds is what they're called. Do that twice, and that's all you gotta do. Alright, we're at the last set of stretch and folds. It's 10 o'clock, it's been another 30 minutes, and I'm really just gonna, it has a lot more strength, so don't need to pull it that much. Basically just pull until you reach some resistance, fold it over, resistance, fold it over, fold it over, and I'm going to do 1 coil fold. Come on, there we go. Much cleaner bowl. Perfect. So now what I'm going to do is cover that. You can use your little hairnet. I just have bowls with lids. We can see the level of the bread is really not super high, but I would expect it to be touching the lid. I'm going to go ahead and put these 2 batches in the fridge overnight. Good night, bread. Yay, good morning. It is 7:45 in the morning. Like I said last night, I put those in at around 10:15. So it has been about 9 hours in the fridge, and our dough is ready to be baked. So the way to tell that dough is ready to be baked, we can see there's some nice sized bubbles on the top here, and in a clear bowl, you can see there's a lot of bubbling around the sides and on the bottom. I'm not gonna flip it all the way over. I can touch this dough and it's not picking up with my finger. It's tacky but not sticky. And when I pull it away from the edge, it pulls nicely. It's not just giving away, but I'm able to actually pick it up. So now I cleaned my work surface and I'm going to shake this dough out. Sometimes it needs a little help when it's cold like this. Go ahead and pull it away from the edge and then let gravity kind of do the rest. Come on. Help it a little bit more. It's very cold. Very clean bowl, the sign of a great rise. Put this in the sink. Immediately fill it with some water. It will be so much easier to clean if I put hot water in that right away. So give me 1 second. I'm gonna scrub out the water sounds and we'll be back to shape these. made 2 loaves at once, so what I'm gonna do is kind of eyeball it. I just give these away or eat them myself, so I don't really care if they're perfectly equal size or shape. I'm just gonna ball this up and put it off to the side. So I'm gonna take this loaf, and this is called lamination. We're going to take it and basically make this like a cutting board. We're gonna really try and get this really flat and not super thin. We don't want any holes in this at this point. We want this to stay intact. Obviously, I just ripped a hole. It's not the end of the world if you do, but we want to try and keep this dough intact. So we're trying not to have any lumps around the edges. Keep it thin. It should resist stretching a little bit because of all the gluten we added with our stretch and folds last night. But now we're going to do what's called the letter folds. We're going to take long way, hot dog way, however you want to say it, into the middle. We're going to take this side and go over the side. And then we just tightly roll this up into a nice log. Now that we have this ball, I'm going to show you how to do it with your hands and also with our bench scraper. You're going to kind of put your pinkies underneath your loaf and roll and pull. Roll and pull. This helps add surface tension to the loaf so that we get a nice crust. It is an essential part to making the sourdough shape stay during baking. Through this, you'll probably hear bubbles popping as the surface breaks. There may be bubbles on the top. That's totally okay. Just adds that nice bubbly texture to your bread when it's baked. I'm going to do this loaf and show you how to shape that with our bench scraper. So I'm going to go ahead and really stretch this guy out. I'm just making 2 plain loaves out of this. If you were to be doing inclusions at any point, adding cheese, I am probably going to make a blueberry lemon loaf with 2 of these other in this bowl that I have. You'd add them now, sprinkle them all within, and then when you do your letter folds, sprinkle more in the middle before you roll it into a ball. That'll help get flavor all throughout your dough and also make sure it doesn't kind of pop out when you are shaping and rolling it. So now letter fold this one and get this into a nice lock. Now I'm going to show you with the bench scraper. You can use this to get underneath your loaf and pull it towards you or push it towards you. Be careful with that sharp edge. You can kind of cut pieces off of your dough. I just did a little bit, not the end of the world, but make sure you treat her nicely. We don't want to hack it up a bunch. So this one has a lot more bubbles than did on the surface. You can see it's ripped. Not a huge deal. We're going to do a second shaping of these, and we'll probably want to fix that. So I'm going to set these here just to rest for a second. I'm going to shape my other loaves, and I will be back to put those in their retards for you. Time for a second shaping. These sat for 30 minutes on the counter. You do not need to do that. I just like to let it happen like that. So what we're going to do is just called a clasp seal, and we're going to put these right in this bowl. So what I do is I take a tea towel. This one is Memphis inspired. There's Zombie Elvis on there. Really fun. So go ahead and line your batard with your towel. You can also just use flour if you don't want to dirty a tea towel. And we're going to sprinkle this towel with flour. I use a tea sifter or a tea strainer that I fill with flour. And you can just kind of thump that out in here. It helps me get a really thin layer without getting chunks on my bread. So go ahead and do that. nice thin layer of flour. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this loaf and we're going to do a clasp. So we just pick this up. I'm going to flip it over so that the seam is on the bottom, and we're literally just going to pinch it in half. Then I drop that right in my floured bowl, and I'll kind of tuck the ends in nicely, pinch this all in, make it a little more cohesive looking on the bottom. I'm going to sprinkle the top with a little bit more flour just so my towel doesn't stick. And then we're going to tuck it in for bed. And you can put this in the fridge for as long as you want. I'll probably do the rest of the day, so like another 7-ish hours. And we'll bake it at the end of the day. Obviously, I will show you that process, scoring and everything. But we'll just put this in for the nap. The longer the second rise is in its form, the more sour the bread will taste. So the shorter you go, the more it will just taste like a country white loaf. Again, I'm going to take the same goes for both shapes. So the round is called a banneton. This is called a petard. So sprinkle this with my flour. I'm going to pick up my loaf and kind of flip it over and just pinch it in half for a clasp. And we're just going to pop it right in this shape. I'm going to stitch this. I'll get this a little closer so you can see. I stitch these a little differently just because I like the shape to stay long. I kind of stitch it like I'm literally doing stitches on a person, pinching that skin together and just keeping that shape nice. It obviously will reshape to the petard a lot better as it rises again in the fridge. Again, we're going to sprinkle the bottom with some flour and just tuck it in to take a nice nap in the fridge. So go ahead and put these in the fridge for as long as you would like. You can do 24 hours, you can do no time at all, you can bake them right now if you'd like. I just like to put them in the fridge because, quite frankly, I have to go to work, so I don't have time. So we will be back when it's time to bake these. All right, so it is now 3:11 in the afternoon. If you remember, we put our loaves in at about 7:45 this morning. So it's been a while. Honestly, like I said, you can take the bread out whenever you'd like. I'm going to take the two that are not petards that are going to have a different shape. We're going to shape those first. So what I'm doing is unwrapping them. I like to re-pinch the bottom of my loaves sometimes because in not the correct baskets, they really spread out a lot. I have a bread sling. You can cut a piece of parchment paper. They do the same thing. I will flip this bread out and pop it off its towel. Just gonna get it into shape. I did a cinnamon sugar loaf, so that's what this one is. Try not to touch it as much as possible to keep that tension. I'm going to use my tea strainer, fill that with some flour again, like this morning, and we're going to kind of add a little bit of flour to the top of this dough. This will help our scoring stand out. I'm going to rub it in and not leave it in pieces. Give it a nice film. Oh, gosh. Come back. I need a new bread lawn. Take your bread lawn or your razor blade. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do one big expansion score across the side. This is going to help our bread breathe. I like to go in also along that top lip and the bottom lip and let it expand a little bit more. And give that another score nice and deep. It'll help it blossom out a lot. And I'm going to do my standard kind of ivy score. I do the vine a little deeper, and then I take 4 or 5 slits along the side of that. Kind of looks like a leaf once it's baked. So now what I'm gonna do, I have my cast iron, my 2 Dutch ovens in the oven as it preheated. A hot Dutch oven helps us rise. You can cook it cold, it just does not work as well in my experience. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this loaf and I'm gonna pop it in our hot Dutch. I'm putting that over here where you cannot see it. And take my sling. Go ahead and pop that in. I like to add about 3 small ice cubes. If you have a bigger ice maker than this, just 2. I like to add 3 ice cubes in with my bread and immediately close it up. It helps give a nice crust. I'm going to leave my Dutch closed with that steaming. Stick that in our oven. And I'm going to set the timer for this loaf to 20 minutes. We're going to bake that at 20 minutes. 20 minutes with the lid on. Now, we'll go ahead and do our second loaf. This is just a plain loaf. I was planning on probably giving a few of these away. Happy New Year to my bread recipients, my neighbors and friends. Pop this loaf out. This one's definitely struggling with shape a little bit. I might take that over to the counter and just give it a quick reshape. Actually, come off there. Just quick took that to be reshaped on my other counter there. Had a little bit more tension because that was kind of a sloppy looking loaf. Dust this up. Give this a nice deep expansion score just like on the other loaf. As you can see there, nice and deep, and we'll do our fleur or vine and leaf on this one too. Perfect. Take out my other Dutch. Take the lid off. And we'll go ahead and pop this one in this Dutch oven. Go ahead and grab my couple of ice cubes here. Hear that sizzle. Put the lid on. We'll go ahead and pop this in the oven. Perfect. Set my other timer for 20 minutes on that loaf. And voila, we got those two going for this round. I like to quick pop the lid off and score those at about 6 minutes. So when my timer is to 14 minutes, I'll cut those again on the expansion score. It gives it enough time to crust a little but expand again. I like to do that. It gives me a great result. You do not have to. Go ahead and experiment if you would like. But we'll come back in 20 minutes to take the lid off. We'll bake that, lower the heat, and we'll bake again for 40 minutes. So I'll come back and kind of show you that. All right, so I took the lid off of my one loaf. I chose not to 6-minute score it this time, but all's well that ends well. We got 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Timer off on my other loaf. We'll open this up. Take that off. Oh, it looks perfect. All right. So with those open, get the sling off of this guy. All right, that's better. All right. So now we're going to lower our temperature to 400 degrees. And we're going to set this timer for 40 minutes. And we're just going to let that go. I kind of like to keep an eyeball on them occasionally. Just to get a feel for if they are ready or if they're not ready. I just go based on color. I like them to be not like black, but, you know, darker brown, a lot of bubbles on the top, and pretty crispy. They, you know, make a clacking sound when I when I tap on them. So that's what I'm looking for in the next, 30 to 40 minutes here in the oven. I'll go ahead and put the camera on the loaves in the oven so you can see what they look like after the 20 with the lid on. And that's it. Then your bread is done. All right, the bread is done. So we're gonna go ahead and take them out and take a look at the loaves. Here we are, cinnamon sugar over here, and just a nice plain loaf on this one. Of course, I'm gonna bump my oven back up to 450 because I have 2 more loaves to bake. But we are all done. This is the end of the sourdough journey. Here's one loaf on the smaller side. This is the one I added some extra tension to. We have a nice 1 score and a nice ear on this side. It's nice and firm with a great crust on it. Set that off to the side. I'm gonna push my cast iron back. I'll need this for my next loaf. And then cinnamon sugar is a little bit wider. I did not reshape this one, but great ear on the side and also really pretty leafing that you can see. So yeah, that's our sourdough. Have fun making and baking, and share any done loaves with me.